Laughing to himself, he let the sword go, though he held on to sight in, to the raging power, the sweetness, and the taint. Contempt slid along the outside of the void. Dogs. Shadow spawn, certainly, but still just. Laughter died. Slowly, the dead dogs and their heads were melting, settling into pools of liquid shadow that quivered slightly, as if alive. Their blood, fanned across the floor, trembled. Suddenly, the smaller pools flowed across the floor in various viscous streams to merge with the larger, which oozed away from the mosaic to mount higher and higher, until the 3 huge black dogs stood there once more, slavering and snarling as they gathered massive haunches around them. He did not know why he felt surprise, dim outside the emptiness. Dogs, yes, but shadow spawn. Whoever had sent them had not been as careless as he had thought, but they still did not know him. Instead of reaching for the sword again, he channeled as he remembered doing once long ago. Howling, the huge dogs leaped, and a thick shaft of white light shot from his hands, like molten steel, like liquid fire. He swept it across the springing creatures. For an instant they became strange shadows of themselves, all colours reversed, and then they were made of sparkling motes that broke apart, smaller and smaller, until there was nothing. He let go of the thing he had made with a grim smile. A purple bar of light still seemed to cross his vision in afterimage. Across the great chamber, a piece of one of the columns crashed to the floor tiles, where that bar of light, or whatever it had been, not light exactly, had swung. Neat slices were gone from the columns. A gaping swath cut half the width of the wall behind them. Did any of them bite you or bleed on you? He spun at the sound of Maureen's voice. Absorbed in what he had done, he had not heard her come up the stairs. She stood, clutching her skirts with both hands, peering at him, face lost in moon shadow. She would have sensed the things the same way he did, but to be here so quickly she must have run. The maidens let you pass. Have you become Fardery's my Maureen? They grant me some privileges of a wise one, she said in a rush, impatience raw in her usually melodious voice. I told the guards I had to speak with you urgently. Now answer me. Did the dark hounds bite you or bleed on you? Did their saliva touch you? No, he answered slowly. Dark hounds. The little he knew he had gotten from old stories, the sort used to frighten children in the Southlands. Some grown-ups believed, too. Why should a bite worry you? You could heal it. Does this mean the Dark One is free? Enclosed in the void as he was, even fear was distant. The tales he had heard said the dark hounds ran the night in the wild hunt, and the Dark One himself the hunter. They left no print on even the softest dirt, only on stone, and they would not stop until you faced and defeated them, or put running water between you. Crossroads was supposed to be particularly dangerous places to meet them, and the time just after sunset or just before sunrise. He had seen enough old stories walking by now to believe that any of it could be true. No, not that brand. She seemed to be regaining her self-control. Her voice was silver chimes again, calm and cool. They are another kind of shadow spawn, something that should never have been made. But their bite is death, as surely as a dagger in the heart, and I do not think I could have healed such a wound before I killed you. Their blood, even their saliva, is poison. A drop on the skin can kill slowly, with great pain at the end. You are lucky there were only 3. Unless you killed more before I arrived. Their packs are usually larger, as many as 10 or 12. Or so say the scraps left from the War of the Shadow. Larger packs. He was not the only target in Ruidian for one of the Forsaken. We must speak of what you used to kill them, Moraine began, but he was already running as hard as he could, ignoring her cries to know where he was going and why. Down flights of stairs, through darkened corridors, where sleepy maidens, roused by the pounding boots, peered at him in consternation from moonlit rooms. Through the front doors, where Lance stood restlessly with the 2 women on guard, his colour-shifting warder's cloak about his shoulders, making parts of him seem to blend into the night. "Where is Moraine?" he shouted as Rand dashed by. But Rand leapt down the broad steps, 2 at a time, without replying. The half-healed wound in his side clenched like a fist, pain he was only vaguely aware of inside the void by the time he reached the building he sought. It stood at the very edge of Ruidian, far from the plaza, as far from the camp Moraine shared with the Wise One as it was possible to be and remain in the city. The upper floors had collapsed in a mound of rubble that fanned out onto the cracked earth beyond the pavement. Only the bottom 2 floors remained whole. Refusing his body's efforts to hunch over around the pain, he went in, still at a dead run. Once the great antechamber, encircled by a stone balcony, had been tall. Now it was taller, open to the night sky, its pale stone floor strewn with rubble from the collapse. In the moon shadows beneath the balcony, 3 dark hounds were up on the hind legs, clawing and chewing at a bronze-clad door that shivered under their assault. The smell of burnt sulphur hung strong in the air. Remembering what had happened before, Rand darted to one side as he channeled, the shaft of liquid white fire streaking by the door as it destroyed the shadow spawn. He had tried to make it less this time, to confine the destruction to the dark hounds, but the thick wall at the far end of the chamber had a shadowed hole in it. Not all the way through, he thought. It was hard to tell by moonlight, but he would have to find his control of this weapon. shone through a number of small holes. There were paw prints in the floor stones, but surprisingly few. Releasing Sidon, he found a place where he would not cut his hands to shreds, pounded on the door. Suddenly, the pain in his side was very real and present. He took a deep breath and tried to thrust it away. "Matt, it's me, Rand. Open up, Matt." After a moment, the door opened a crack, letting out a spill of lamplight. Matt peered through doubtfully, then pulled the door wider, leaning against it as if he had run 10 miles, carrying a sack of rocks. Except for a silver fox-head medallion hanging around his neck, its eye shaped and shaded like the ancient Aes Sedai symbol, he was naked. The way Matt felt about Aes Sedai, Rand was surprised he had not sold the thing long since. Deeper in the room, a tall, golden-haired woman was calmly wrapping a blanket around herself, a maiden by the spears and buckler lying at her feet. Rand hastily averted his eyes and cleared his throat. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right." "We're fine." Uneasily, Matt looked around the antechamber. "Now we are. You killed it or something?" "I don't want to know what it was, as long as it's gone. It's bloody hard on a man sometimes, being your friend." "Not only a friend, another tavern, and perhaps a key to victory in Tarmangaiden. Anyone who wanted to strike at Rand had reason to strike at Matt as well. But Matt always tried to deny both things." "They're gone, Matt. Darkhounds, 3 of them." "I told you I didn't want to know," Matt groaned. "Darkhounds now. I can't say it isn't always something new around you. A man wouldn't get bored, not until the day he died." If I hadn't been on my feet for a drink of wine when the door started to open, he trailed off shivering and scratched a red place on his right arm as he studied the ravaged metal sheathing. "You know, it's funny how the mind plays tricks. When I was putting everything I had into holding this door shut, I could have sworn one of them had chewed a hole right through it. I could see its bloody head and its teeth. Melindra's spear didn't even faze it." Maureen's arrival was more spectacular this time, running in, skirts held up, panting and fuming. Lan was at her heels, with his sword in hand and thunderclouds on his stone face, and right behind, a throng of Far Teresmai that spilled out into the street. Some of the maidens wore no more than small clothes, but everyone held her spears alertly and had her shufa wrapped around her head, black veil hiding all but her eyes, ready to kill. Maureen and Lan, at least, looked relieved to see him standing there calmly talking to Matt, though the Aes Sedai also looked as if she meant to have strong words with him. With the veils, it was impossible to tell what the Isle thought. Letting out a loud yelp, Matt darted back into his room and began hastily tugging on a pair of breeches. His capering impeded by the way he kept trying to haul at the breeches and scratch his arm at the same time. The golden-haired maiden watched with a broad grin that threatened to break into laughter. What's the matter with your arm? Rand asked. I told you the mind plays funny tricks, Matt said, still trying to scratch and pull at the same time. When I thought that thing would shoot through the door, I thought it slogged all over my arm too. And now it bloody itches like fire. Even looks like a burn there. Rand opened his mouth, but Moraine was already pushing past him. Staring at her, Matt fell down, frantically dragging his breeches all the rest of the way. But she knelt beside him, ignoring his protests, clasping his head in her hands. Rand had been healed before and seen it done, but instead of what he expected, Matt only gave a shiver and lifted up the medallion by its leather thong so that it hung against his hand. Bloody thing is colder than ice all of a sudden, he muttered. What are you doing, Moraine? If you want to do something, heal this itch. It has my whole arm now. His right arm was red from wrist to shoulder and had begun to look puffy. Moraine stared at him with the most startled expression Rand had ever seen on her face. Maybe the only one. I will, she said slowly. If the medallion is cold, take it off. Matt frowned at her, then finally pulled it over his head and laid it beside him. She took his head again, and he gave a shout, as if he had been ducked headfirst into ice. His legs stiffened and his back arched. His eyes stared at nothing, as wide as they would go. When Moraine took her hands away, he slumped, gulping air. The redness and swelling were gone. It took 3 tries before he could speak. Blood and ashes. Does it have to be that flaming way every flaming time? It was just a bloody itch. You watch your tongue with me, Moraine told him, getting up, or I will find Nynaeve and put her in charge of you. But her heart was not in it. She could have been talking in her sleep. She was trying not to stare at the fox head as Matt hung it back around his neck. You will need rest, she said absently. Stay in bed tomorrow if you feel like it. The maiden in the blanket, Melindra, knelt behind Matt and put her hands on his shoulders, looking up at Moraine over his head. I will see that he does as you say, said I. With a sudden groan, she rustled his hair. He is my little mischief maker now. From the horrified look on Matt's face, he was gathering his strength to run. Rand became aware of soft, amused chuckles behind him. The maidens, shuvas and veils around their shoulders now, had crowded around and were peering into the room. Teach him to sing, Spear Sister, Adeline said, and the other maidens crowed with laughter. Rand rounded on them firmly. Let the man rest. Don't some of you have to put on clothes? They gave way reluctantly, still trying to peer into the room, until Moraine came out. Will you leave us, please? The Aes Sedai said, as the mangled door banged shut behind her. She half looked back with a vexed tightening of her mouth. I must speak with Rand Althor alone. Nodding, the Eye woman started for the door, some still jesting about the weather. Melindra, a shadow it seemed. Rand wondered if Matt knew that, would teach Matt to sing, whatever that meant. for now. I hope you've gotten nice and cozy with this fireplace.